My name's Eric. I'm 32, and this happened a few months ago. But it's still eating at me in a way I can't really explain. I was invited to dinner at my girlfriend's parents' place. Nothing fancy, she said. It would be casual. Just her mom, her dad, her little brother, and us. We'd been dating for a year at that point. Things were going well. I'd met her mom once before in passing, but this was the first time I'd be sitting down at the table with the whole family. She seemed excited about it, said her dad could be a little intense, but that he'd like me. I didn't think much of it. I put on a clean shirt, brought a bottle of wine, and tried to keep things light. I really wanted this to go well. From the second we walked in, though, something felt off. Her dad shook my hand. But it wasn't a handshake. It was a test. One of those grips that goes just a little too hard and holds just a little too long. He said my name like it was a challenge. Her mom smiled politely, offered to take our coats, but didn't make eye contact. The little brother, maybe 15, nodded and went back to his phone. I complimented the house, asked about the dog that came running up, tried to ease into it. But her dad didn't say much, just poured drinks and watched me like he was waiting for something. I figured it was nerves, or maybe he just wasn't a chatty guy. But looking back, I think he knew exactly what he was doing from the start. Dinner. Started off with the usual small talk. Her mom asked me where I was from, what my job was like, how I met her daughter. Not glamorous, but stable, and I make decent money for my age. I've always been proud of how I built my life up on my own. I didn't grow up with much. No family trust, no backup plan. I worked through school, paid off my loans, and I'm finally in a place where I can breathe a little. So I told them the basics. Nothing over the top. Her dad just listened, nodding slowly like he was collecting data. Then he asked where I went. To school, I told him. It's not Ivy League, but a solid public university. He hummed. That kind of that sounds neutral, but it was during dessert. It's literally as the plates were being set down that it happened. Out of nowhere, her dad leaned back in his chair, looked right at me and said, "So Eric, what do you make a year? Not what field are you in or how's work going?" Straight to the number. Everyone kind of paused, forks in hand. I glanced at my girlfriend, waiting for her to say something, to maybe redirect or even just shoot him a look. Nothing. She kept her eyes on the pie. Her mom didn't flinch either, like this was just how dinner went in their house. I cleared my throat and said, I'm doing fine, thanks." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I didn't ask how you're doing. I asked what you make." That's when I realized this wasn't curiosity. It was a test, and I was already failing. I tried to laugh it off. Made some stupid comment like, "Guess I left my pay stubs at home, but it landed flat." Her dad didn't laugh. No one did. I looked at her again, hoping for something. A smirk, a nudge, anything that would let me know this was as weird to her as it was to me. But she just picked at her pie like she was trying to pretend she wasn't even there. Her dad leaned in a little, elbows on the table, and said, "I just think a man who wants to be serious with my daughter should be comfortable talking about what kind of life he can provide." That hit me in the chest, the way he said it. So, matter of fact, like I wasn't already building a life of my own, like I wasn't already enough. I felt heat rising up my neck. I've never been good at public conflict, especially not in settings like that. I come from a family where you keep the peace, smile through it, and deal with the emotions later. So I just sat there, blinking, trying to figure out if I should answer, walk out, or throw the damn pie across the room. Her mom finally broke the silence, saying something like, "Well, this pie turned out nice, didn't it?" As if that would make the tension disappear. It didn't. I forced a smile and said it was good, but I couldn't taste it. I could barely swallow. My stomach had tied itself in knots, and all I could think about was how no one in that room, not even the person I was dating, thought I deserved a shred of defense after that. The energy at the table shifted, but not in a good way. Her dad moved on to talking about real estate, casually mentioning how he bought his first house at 25 and had paid it off by 30. It was clear who that was aimed at. I'm 32 and still renting. Not because I'm irresponsible, but because the market's insane, and I've been doing it all on my own. Still, I nodded along, pretending to be interested, but I wasn't really hearing the words anymore. I kept thinking, should I have answered? Should I have said the number? Would that have shut him up? or made it worse. I was trapped between wanting to stand up for myself and not wanting to cause a scene in someone. Elsa's house? We stayed about another hour, though it felt like 3. Her little brother disappeared back to his room, and her mom started cleaning up. I offered to help, mostly just to get out of that chair, but she politely declined. My girlfriend barely spoke to me after dessert. She kept checking her phone, nodding to whatever her dad was saying, and laughing at things that weren't even funny. I couldn't tell if she was trying to keep the peace, or if this was just how she operated around him. Either way, I felt like I was on the outside of some long-established performance, one where I clearly hadn't been given a script. On the drive back, the silence was suffocating. I waited for her to bring it up, to say something. I thought maybe once we were out of the house, she'd let out a breath and say, "Wow, that was intense," or even just acknowledge how weird her dad had been, but nothing, just GPS directions, and the sound of her nails tapping her phone screen. Finally, I asked, "Was that normal for him?" She blinked like I'd interrupted something important, and said, "He just likes to know who he's dealing with." Like that explained it. Like I should have expected to be cross-examined over pie. I didn't say anything back. I just looked out the window and counted the red lights until we got to my place. When we pulled up, she didn't turn the engine off. I asked if she wanted to come in. She hesitated, then said, "I think I'll just head home. It's been a long day." Dumber. Hug, no kiss, not even a squeeze on the arm, just a tired smile and a good night. I stood on the curb and watched her drive away, trying to make sense of the whole night. I didn't feel angry exactly. It was something worse. It's that deep, cold feeling when you realize you've been walking toward something that wasn't ever walking toward you, like you missed the signs because you wanted to believe too hard. I went upstairs, sat on my couch in the dark, and tried to figure out if the guy I met tonight was just a jerk or if she saw me the same way he did all along. I didn't sleep much that night. My brain kept replaying the moment he asked about my salary like it was some kind of court deposition. And worse than that was how she just sat there, not saying a word, like it wasn't even weird. I kept trying to justify it to myself. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she didn't know how to react. Maybe she didn't agree with him, but didn't want to start a fight in front of everyone. But then again, I kept going back to her face when he asked me the question. She didn't look shocked. She didn't look uncomfortable. She looked like she knew it was coming. I think that's what really got me, that she didn't think. I deserved to be warned. The next morning, she sent a text like everything was normal. "Thanks for coming last night. Hope it wasn't too much." That was it. No mention of how I was treated. No acknowledgement that her dad was out of line. I typed out 3 different responses and deleted all of them. I didn't want to sound bitter. I didn't want to start a fight. But I also didn't want to pretend I was okay with how that went down. So I ended up sending a short, "Yeah, no worries." She didn't respond after that. Not that day, not the day after. And I didn't reach out again. I think we both just let the silence fill in where the relationship used to be. By early afternoon, I caved and called a friend from work. James, because he's the one guy I know who will give it to me straight without making it dramatic. I told him what happened, the handshake, the salary question, the way she went quiet. He didn't sound surprised. He asked, "Has she ever pushed back on her dad before?" I had to think about it. The answer was no. I'd heard her vent about him, but always in a way that made it sound like background noise, something she'd lived with so long she'd stopped noticing. James said, "Then he wasn't testing you. He was showing her you." That stuck with me. Not just a power move at the table, but a measurement, one she already accepted. I hung up and sat with that for a long time. Later that same day, she finally followed up with a longer message. "Sorry if my dad made things awkward. He can be protective. He just wants to know I'm with someone stable. Stable. Not kind. Not decent. Not good to me." Stable, I asked what that meant, and she said, "He wants to make sure you're financially ready if things get serious." I reminded her we split rent, bills, trips. "I've never missed a payment," she replied. "He's old school." I looked at that text and realized we weren't in the same relationship. I was building a life with her. She was getting me pre-approved. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about how calm she was through all of it. Not just at dinner, but after. The way she processed everything like it was routine. I tried to remember moments in our relationship where maybe this kind of thing had happened before, in smaller ways. And when I looked back, I saw it. Her hesitations when I talked about money. The times she'd say, "That's just how my dad is," when I questioned something he'd said. The way she'd never really introduced me to her family until that night, even though we'd been dating for a year. I used to think it was shyness or boundaries. But now I wonder if she was keeping me in the shallow end of her life on purpose. Just until she decided if I was worth the deeper water. And I guess that dinner was her answer. I spent the next few days thinking about whether I should end things or wait for her to do it. It wasn't just about the dinner anymore. It was the silence that followed. The way I kept waiting for her to say I should have spoken up, or I didn't realize how uncomfortable that must have been. But all I got was, "He's protective." Like that excused everything. And I started to realize that I was in a relationship where I had to keep proving my worth, not just to her dad, but maybe to her too. I'm not someone who needs grand gestures or praise, but I need to feel like I'm being chosen, like I matter. That night I didn't feel chosen. I felt evaluated. And the worst part is, I don't think I passed. A week went by without us seeing each other. We texted a little, mostly surface-level stuff. No real conversations. Purpose, just to see if she'd notice. She didn't. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care enough to ask why. I stopped initiating, stopped offering to call at night, stopped sending good morning messages. And every time I thought about reaching out, I'd hear her dad's voice in my head. "What do you make a year?" Like that one question had. Poisoned everything that came before it. It wasn't even about the number. It was about how fast I became a spreadsheet instead of a person, and how fast she'd let me. Eventually, I told her I needed space, and her reply was just, "Okay, let me know if you want to talk." No questions, no fight, no what's going on, just a smooth exit. Too smooth. I tried not to let it mess with my head, but it did. It made me second-guess a lot of things. Like whether I'd been fooling myself the whole time. Maybe she never saw me as someone she'd bring fully into her life. Maybe I was always temporary, a safe, stable placeholder until someone came along who met her dad's standards. It made me question if I even want to be in a relationship where I have to be vetted like a job candidate, where love is conditional on whether or not I tick the right boxes. I talked to James again, and he said something that stuck. Some people want a partner. Some people want a project. And maybe to her, I was the latter, something to present. To justify, to explain away, not someone to fight for when things got uncomfortable. After that, I didn't reach out again. I expected to feel worse than I did, honestly. I thought the silence would feel like a punishment that I'd be pacing around waiting for her to call or message, but it never happened. Instead, I felt relief. Not immediate, not loud. But a quiet kind that builds when you realize you've been forcing something that wasn't ever really working. I kept going back to that dinner, to the moment her dad looked me dead in the face and tried to put a price tag on whether I deserved to be in that room. I don't think I would have cared as much if she had just looked at me, even once, and said, "You're enough." But she didn't. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. It was like a glass shattered, and now all I had was the mess on the floor. A couple weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that she had gone on a weekend trip with some coworkers. One of them was a guy she used to talk about, always with that weird tone people use when they're trying too hard to sound neutral. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. Not because I was jealous. I wasn't, surprisingly. But because I realized I didn't care enough to chase closure anymore. That dinner didn't just end our relationship. It ended the illusion that I was part of her future. It gave me the clarity I didn't know I needed. And as painful as it was, I'm weirdly grateful for it. Sometimes it takes someone insulting you to your face for you to stop begging for scraps. Sometimes it takes silence to hear the truth. About a month after everything went down, I got a random text from her. It was just a photo of a bakery menu. Caption, no explanation. But I knew what it meant. That guy she used to mention, the one from work, apparently he'd opened a place and she'd been there. Maybe she sent it to make me feel something. Maybe it was her weird way of checking if the line was still open. I stared at it for a while, trying to decide if I should reply. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized it didn't pull anything out of me. I didn't feel hurt or angry, or even tempted. I just felt done. Not bitter, not dramatic, just done. Like a switch had flipped and I finally saw everything for what it was. I never responded. I deleted the message and blocked the number. I didn't want to be a second option or a memory someone could poke at when they felt lonely. I deserved better than that. I'd spent too long trying to earn a seat at a table that never had a place set for me. Looking back, I think the whole relationship was leading up to that one dinner. Like the truth had been simmering just below the surface the entire time, waiting for a crack to rise through. When it finally did, it wasn't loud. It was quiet, awkward. A single sentence and a moment of silence that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't leave angry. I left awake. In the months that followed, I started putting energy back into myself. I reconnected with friends I'd been distant from. I started going to the gym more regularly. I even took on a freelance project I'd been putting off for over a year. And you know what? None of it felt like a distraction. It felt like recovery. Like I was finally getting pieces of myself back that I hadn't even noticed I was giving away. I don't think she was a bad person. But I think she was someone who needed things I couldn't give or didn't want to admit I had already given. And I was someone who needed to feel safe being seen. It's not quietly evaluated behind the curtain of someone else's expectations. Every now and then, I'll hear something that reminds me of her. A song, a phrase, the sound of someone laughing. At a restaurant in that same way she used to. But it's like hearing a story you once liked and realizing it doesn't hit the same anymore. Not because it changed, but because you did. That dinner will always be burned into my memory, not for what was said, but for what wasn't. For the way someone you care about can watch you get torn down and not lift a finger. And once that happens, there's no going back. It's not something you forgive or forget. It's just something you survive. And once you do, you never let yourself sit at a table like that again. A few people in my life asked why I didn't try harder to fix things, why I didn't demand an apology or push for a bigger conversation. But the truth is, when someone shows you where you stand in their world, believe them. That dinner was the loudest answer I could have ever gotten. If I had to beg her to see it from my side, to recognize how hurtful that was, then I was already asking too much. I don't want to be in a relationship where my pain has to be explained, where I have to translate basic respect into something digestible for the person I'm with. I want to be with someone who sees it as clearly as I do. And that night made it clear we were never looking through the same lens. I think what hurt most wasn't the question her dad asked. It was the fact that he felt like he could, that he knew she wouldn't stop him, that he didn't even hesitate. Told me everything I needed to know about how I was viewed in that room. Not as family, not as someone who belonged, but as someone under review. And the silence that followed. That was the real answer. That's when I realized I had spent over a year with someone who, when it really counted, stood on the sidelines. And maybe that's the kind of person she is. Maybe that's the kind of family she comes from. But that's not the kind of life I want. Not anymore. I started thinking a lot about what I was modeling for myself. What kind of love I was telling. Myself I deserved. I used to think love was about patience, understanding, giving people the benefit of the doubt. And those things matter, but not when they come at the expense of self-respect. That dinner shifted something in me. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't storm out or make a scene, but something closed quietly, like a door that had been stuck for a long time finally giving way. I think I stopped trying that night, stopped convincing, stopped hoping, and it wasn't sadness I felt in the end. It was clarity. Like I could finally breathe in a room I didn't even realize had been suffocating me. A couple months later, I ran into her by accident at a grocery store. We made awkward small talk for a minute, just catching up on surface-level things. She looked good. Calm, like life had gone on. And when she said we should catch up sometime, I smiled and said sure. But we both knew it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't anger in that moment. Just two people standing on opposite sides of something they couldn't walk back from. I walked out of that store feeling oddly light. Like I'd just walked past a version of my life that could have been, and I was okay letting it stay behind. I've told this story a few times to friends, each time a little shorter, a little less detailed. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've accepted that some things don't need to be fully understood to be real. That dinner wasn't the end of a relationship. It was the start of a different version of myself. One that stopped trying to fit into spaces where the chair was always just slightly out of reach. I still think about that moment sometimes, the pause at the table after her dad said what he said. The way it felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. And even now, I wonder if that moment would have gone differently if she had just said one thing, anything. But she didn't, and maybe that's all the answer I ever needed. I didn't get closure, or a dramatic ending, or even a proper breakup conversation. It just stopped. The texts faded. The calls ended. The connection dissolved in silence. And honestly, I think that's what makes it stick with me the most. It didn't crash or explode, just drifted out of reach like a balloon you didn't mean to let go of. And you stand there watching it float away, wondering if it was ever really yours to hold in the first place.